Hi guys, it's Jerome Rush here. Today I'm going to take you through the creation of a portrait, but instead of using watercolour for the portrait, we're going to use a medium which most of us have in the kitchen cupboard, decaf coffee. Yep, it's going to be used for paper, not your mouth. If you like, you can do the same thing using one colour of watercolour or three colours of the similar palette. These portraits are going to be inspired by the famous Australian Portrait Painting Award, the Archival Prize. So what is the Archival Prize? The Archival Prize is the most important prize for portraits in Australia. It's probably the most important award, artistically speaking, in Australia, full stop. It was first awarded in 1921. The money for the prize was left by J.F. Archibald, who was the editor of the Bulletin magazine, and he died in 1919. The prize is awarded by the trustee of the Australia Gallery of New South Wales for the best portrait of an Australasian person famous in art, writing, science or politics, or just someone significant to the artist. The artist must have lived in Australia for at least a year, so that's pretty good. The award has featured artists like William Dobell, Ben Quilty with his portrait of Margaret Olley, and Yvette Coppersmith in 2019. So today we're going to create a portrait using coffee as our base instead of watercolour, basically so we can source anything from home to use as our medium of choice. So we're going to start off by just using a decaffeinated coffee like the one you see here, and we're going to put a little piece of that into the containers in front and create our levels from that. And there we go, we've got least, middle, most. So now you can give each of the grounds a test, from the lightest to mid-range to the darkest. Once you've gotten your 3 shades of coffee ground, you then prepare your paper by taping off a nice clean edge. So when you're ready to start your portrait, you have to select an individual who's significant to you, someone who you really understand, and someone who you admire. So having someone close to you, like a family member or a good friend, is probably the best sort of portrait you want to tackle. So you're going to have to make a selection of different photos that you want to use for your portrait. Try to use upper torso, from the torso up pose, as that is probably the most traditional and probably the simplest way of tackling the portrait. So possibly choose from 3 or 4 different photos and make a selection from that. Once you've made your selection, decide whether you want the photo to be in portrait or in a landscape mode. I'm going to crop mine, so it's going to be in portrait. When you're creating these portraits, it's a nice idea to try and add some symbolic elements to the work. So bits and pieces within the portrait that help add to the story of the sitter. So in my portrait, for example, I'm going to add in a camera. I'm also, because the sitter is a photographer, I'm going to add in the Acropolis into the background because I know she's very interested in Greek archaeology. And I'm also going to add in the necklace pendant which she has around her neck, which is based around the labyrinth. So they are all three very personal elements which are going to give the portrait that you're creating more individuality and a greater reflection upon the sitter as a whole. Having selected your photo, you're going to have to consider a number of different options. You're going to have to look at the negative space, which is the space around the sitter. You're going to have to think about the gesture lines of the face and the neck and the body. You're going to have to think about the guidelines for the eyes and nose and lips. And you're also going to have to consider the simple shapes that you're going to have to identify when you first start creating your portrait. So we'll start off just getting in the negative space. Now I'm going to just draw in the shape of the head, and the gesture line, which is coming out like that and down. So what I've done here is the gesture line, the shape of the head here, the general shape of the hair, and the neck and shoulder. Like so. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is draw the eyes and nose and lip line. So here, notice there's a slight, that's a straight line, and that's an angle line. So angle line goes like this, a little bit of a curve, and there's the nose line and the lip, about the same, about there, bottom of the lip. Okay, so now we've got in our major shapes. Just going to fix up any little bits. Okay, so we've drawn in the general shapes, the head, the shoulders and the hair, and we've drawn in the body line of the nose, lips and mouth, and hopefully that all makes sense. But now we're going to add in any details within our drawing, like within the eyes, nose, lips and any other detail areas. When you're drawing a portrait, it is very important to draw what you see, not what you think you see. When you're adding in details, it's a good idea to consider the size of things in relation to each other. Like for example, the gap between the two eyes is the size of an eye. When creating the portraits, it is important to keep them purely in line rather than have any tone. Tone will be left to the use of the light, middle and dark
shades created using the coffee grind. Remember when you're creating a portrait to add any symbols which help towards the narrative of the sitter. These give the portrait more depth and more interest for the viewer.
Maybe it gets darker here. There we go. We got in our basic forms, but we don't want to go into too much detail just yet because it's just there as our guide. So we've got the Acropolis, we've got the labyrinth shapes here, we've got the Canon camera, and we've got the actual portrait itself. Hopefully you can bring in some of the characteristics of the individual through some of the details in the drawing. Hope you like it. Okay, so the next step we're going to do is the actual watercolor work. So we're going to start off with our lightest tone of coffee ground, but with our biggest brush. So we're going to use a brush like about so big. So this is our lightest tone with quite a big brush. Get a good chunk of that in our palette. So what we've got to do is get in all our tonal range except for the areas where the light has hit. So you'll see on the nose here, on the edge of the face, on the hair, it's all got tone, no tone. So let's just go in.
So next up, you're going to be looking at creating your mid-tones for your drawing using a medium-sized brush. You'll be looking at tone on the edge of the face where the face meets the neck, in the clothes, the eyes and the eye sockets, and the nose just underneath the end. And don't forget to add in a bit of hairstyling. And work the background.
just adding in any other marks that we can make here.
To get rid of any sharp coffee water stain definition, you can use a wet tissue and dab on those areas to make it appear more tonally variant. For the final tone, the darkest coffee ground, you can use a selection of more thinner, detailed brushes. If you haven't quite gotten the detail that you require, you can always add in some more ground coffee into your mixture to make it even darker and push those values. By this point, you should be adding any final touches, like for example enhancing the tonal range by using a damp tissue or pushing the darker values in the shaded areas. Take this final reflection as an opportunity to look at your work and adjust any of the problems that you see within it, such as areas that are too dark or areas that need further attention to detail.
Okay, so once you're happy with the copy work that you've done, you can add in some highlights if you like, using white graphite, a brown graphite, or a darker brown graphite. I'm just using this because I was lucky enough to have these, but if you have some white chalk or a white pencil or a dark brown pencil, you can use those just to add the darker points and the highlights. So first off, I'm going to just add in
Finally, carefully remove the masking tape from the edge of your drawing. This will give the appearance of a nice, clean, finished edge. So that's how you create your own Archival Prize using resources that you found at home. We hope you enjoyed it. Us at MPRG would love to see some of the work you've created, so send us an email on mprg@mornpen.vic.gov.au. That's mprg@mornpen.vic.gov.au. pen.vic.gov.au. Follow MPRG or Jerome Rush Artist on Instagram or Facebook.